This is Audible.
You are listening to Christian Audio's production of Discerning the Voice of God, How to Recognize When God is Speaking, by Priscilla C. Shirer. This book is read by Robin Miles. This audio recording was produced in 2016 by Christian Audio, which owns the copyright. No portion of this recording may be reproduced for any reason without prior written consent from Christian Audio. This edition issued by contractual agreement with Moody, originally published in English as Discerning the Voice of God, How to Recognize When God is Speaking, copyright 2012 by Priscilla C. Shirer. All rights reserved. Please visit christianaudio.com, facebook.com/christianaudio, or twitter.com/christianaudio to offer your impressions of this work and to explore additional titles. Dedication. Jerry, this book is still dedicated to you. Thank you for being an example of someone who longs to hear him, takes the time to hear him, and encourages me to do the same. Between friends. I have called you friends. John, chapter 15, verse 15. There are acquaintances, and then there are friends. Acquaintances recognize you when you see them, ask about the ages of your children, wonder when's the last time you heard from someone you both used to know. Take care, nice to see you. But friends, get two friends together for 10 minutes, and they're into each other's lives, not just their Christmas letters. They're connecting by heart, not just by a hug or a handshake. And that's how I feel right now, connecting with you through the pages of this book, like friends. Perhaps you were here with me before, several years ago, when I first put this message down on paper, or you've gone through the 6-week Bible study, Discerning the Voice of God. And now we have a chance to catch up and expand on what we've learned since. If this is our first time to meet up like this, then I'm glad to have you as a new friend, because we have a hunger to hear from God that unites us in spirit. Probably one that each of us would freely admit some frustration over, but in the end, something we know we simply cannot live without. And thank God we don't have to. Perhaps, like me, you've spent far too many years of your life not hearing, or at least not recognizing his voice. You've read in the Bible about people to whom he spoke. You've heard from believers today who talk about how God has spoken to them. But maybe only rarely, if ever, would you say that you've experienced this kind of connection with him yourself. I can completely relate to that. I know exactly what it's like to hear nothing but silence after I've prayed and prayed about something, or to be so confused by flying thoughts and voices that I couldn't pick God's voice out of a crowd. I know the kinds of feelings and attitudes that go along with not really expecting him to show up and leave directions. Truly, we get one another's questions about discerning the voice of God. But even though I've brought a lot of stubbornness and impatience to the Lord to work with, I can sit here today and testify to you, by the mercies of God, that he's brought me a long, long way. Through his long suffering and steadfastness, he has invited me in to know him better. And the more intimate I've become with him, the more acquainted I've become with his voice. He has proven himself to me, because he loves proving his word true to all his children, to you. Therefore, with all the confidence one person can possess, I can assure you today that God does speak. I'm learning that if my spiritual ears are open, the same voice that called me into his marvelous light will speak into my daily life. The Bible declares that God is the same yesterday and today and forever, Hebrews chapter 13, verse 8. Meaning, the same God who spoke with the prophets of old also speaks with his saints today. The Old Testament says that what distinguished the faith of the Israelites from all others was that they heard the voice of God. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 33. The Apostle Paul, writing in the New Testament, reminds us that the difference between the relationship we have with the one true God and the relationship pagans have with their idols is that their gods are silent. See 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 2. This conversational nature of our relationship with the Almighty makes our faith unique. It isn't based on rules or regulations, on rugged pilgrimages to make, or sacred rivers to bathe in. The foundation of our faith is on sweet fellowship with God, who clearly, biblically, wants our relationship with Him to be both intimate and interactive. I mean, come on, do you really think He loved you enough to die for you, but not enough to talk to you? When Jesus walked the earth, He willingly revealed Himself to everyone around Him, knowing full well that many, if not most, would reject Him. Why then would He not desire deeply to speak to us, we who have received Him by faith through His mercy and grace? He desires to speak to us. In fact, He places a high priority on this because it's so crucial to the kind of relationship He wants to have with us. And so, knowing this, we can't help but ask, then why don't we hear Him? What keeps us from recognizing Him? How can we know when He is speaking? That's what discerning the voice of God is all about. My goal in this book is to come alongside you, just as others have and continue to come alongside me, sharing what I've learned and what each of us can grow to experience in seeking to hear from the Lord. But I want to be sure you hear me when I use the word grow, because that's what we're doing here. We're growing. Nobody has all of this figured out, no matter how 100% foolproof people claim their knowledge to be. Even by the time we get all the way through this book together, we will still be more than capable of getting our fallen selves in the way of what we truly want from our walk with the Lord. But because He loves us so much, He will allow even our errors and flaws to be good teachers for the future as we keep practicing and developing under His master instruction. As we grow. When I first started jogging, for example, I couldn't make it halfway around the block without heaving and sputtering and finally running out of pep. Yet as discouraging as this was to my goals for better fitness, I couldn't help noticing that the attempt itself was doing something positive in me. My body was responding to the workouts. Even though I was still doing more walking than running, as I tried to complete the circuit back home, I was starting to see little by little improvement each day. Pitiful though it may have looked to anyone snickering at me from the neighborhood windows, and slow as it may have been while I waited for my running ability to kick in, something was happening. My body was changing, and my endurance was increasing, even while I was learning. The growing process is not a waste. There are benefits every small step of the way. And thank the Lord for that. This is precisely why I've included so many personal stories in this work. I want you to see what a journey this has been for me, a journey that I've neither begun nor finished simply by reading a book or taking a course, but rather through the patient work that the Lord has done and is still doing in my life in very practical ways. When I've made mistakes, missed hearing Him, or become impatient waiting for His direction, I've often felt like the journey may not have been worth it, and that I'll never get this right. But I hope these very personal experiences of mine will show you how each step with Him has helped me see more clearly than before. I also pray that you'll discover how your own adventure with God is designed to do the same. Build one valuable lesson on top of another as He leads you ever closer to Him. I know how easy it can be to give up, how discouraging it can be when you don't feel like God has any interest in talking to you and revealing His will. There's a lot working against you. From the enemy's deceptions to your own fatigue and weakness, this whole thing can seem like an impossible search. But this book hasn't caught your eye by accident. God is speaking even now, stirring in you again a desire and expectancy for His voice. And no matter where you're starting from, you can start to grow again, to grow closer, to hear Him. What I'm about to show you are not just general guidelines, as effective as they can be. Some guidelines help us learn to hear from God, but the important thing to remember is that the only reason they work is because God is speaking, not because we've pushed the right buttons or lined up the pieces in the proper order. God speaks because He loves you. And apart from a relationship with Him, no amount of effort and trying can stir one whisper from the heavens. This is His work, His desire. All He asks is your receptive heart. So as we get ready to dig in, let's say a prayer that God will bless what He's about to give us, and that He'll open our hearts, certain beyond a doubt that we'll hear from His Word and His Spirit. Let's get started.